My parents are sitting in the courthouse gallery, wrinkled, shaking, and silent. My father's suit doesn't fit like it used to. His shoulders seem smaller. My mother's hands, once always adorned in gold and fresh manicures, are gripping the edge of the bench like it's the only thing keeping her upright. They look like people waiting for a verdict they already know is coming. And they should, because they lost the house first, then the cars, then the retirement fund, then the respect of the community they once ruled with smiles and pearl-clutched judgment. And now they're about to lose the last thing they've been clutching for dear life, their reputation, the story they've told for the last 10 years, the one where I was the mistake, the problem, the daughter they were forced to cut off to protect the family. What they don't know is that story dies today. And the girl they disowned? She's the one holding the pen. My name is Lena. I'm 27 years old, and 10 years ago, my parents cut me out of their lives because of a lie, one they never tried to verify, one they were eager to believe because it was easier than admitting. They didn't know who I really was. I remember the day like it still lives in the corner of my mind. I was 17, on track to be valedictorian, polite, bookish, never missed curfew, the kind of daughter parents usually brag about. But none of that mattered when the rumor started. I walked into the kitchen and found my mother already crying, my father standing, stiff, jaw clenched, arms crossed. They didn't ask. They accused. I tried to explain, swore it wasn't true, told them it was a lie started by someone bitter and bored. But they had already made up their minds. They called me a disgrace, said I'd embarrassed the family, and before I could even process what was happening, I was out the door with a garbage bag full of clothes and a whisper of a warning. Don't come back until you're someone worth forgiving. But what they didn't know was that I wouldn't come back to beg. I'd come back to bury the lie with the truth. I grew up in a house where the blinds were always drawn, unless company was coming, where every emotion was folded neatly and tucked behind tight smiles and even tighter Sunday dresses, where reputation wasn't just important. It was everything. We didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about failure. We talked about appearances, what the neighbors might think, what the pastor might say, what would make the church bulletin look clean. I was Lena Winslow, only daughter of Jonathan and Ruth Winslow, esteemed figures in our conservative town. My father was a deacon. My mother ran the women's prayer circle. We were the picture of a respectable, God-fearing family. And I was the daughter who followed all the rules. I said yes, sir, and no, ma'am. I got straight A's, kept my skirts below the knee, and learned to walk the line so well it left calluses on my soul. My parents didn't hug. They handed out approval like rationed sugar, 1 teaspoon at a time, and only if you earned it. And, even then, they never let you forget how sweet it could have been if you'd just tried a little harder. So I tried. I tried so hard. I dreamed of becoming a psychologist. Or maybe a literature professor. I wanted to study the way people broke and stitched themselves back together with stories. I wanted to understand my own family, why my mother cried behind closed doors and why my father never once said, "I'm proud of you," without a condition attached. I wanted to leave, not because I hated them, but because I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't being watched. The only person who ever truly saw me was my grandmother. My mother's mother, Evelyn. She wasn't like the rest of the family. She wore turquoise jewelry and told off-color jokes. She read poetry aloud in the kitchen while making jam from scratch. She believed in tough love, but the kind that came with gentleness, not judgment. She once caught me hiding in the pantry after a fight with my parents and said, "You're not too much, Lena. They're just too small to hold all of you." She was the only person who knew I liked Sylvia Plath, that I wrote essays just for fun, that I didn't believe in everything we were taught to say we believed in. She never tried to change me. She just let me be. And when she passed away my junior year, I felt like someone had turned the volume up on all the silence that came after her. My parents didn't cry. They called it God's will and told me to stop asking questions. So I swallowed the grief, smiled through the eulogy, memorized the Psalms they asked me to read at her funeral. I think that was the first time I realized I wasn't mourning with my family. I was mourning inside them. Still, I never imagined they'd abandon me. I thought we were safe. I thought if I just kept being good, being useful, being invisible when necessary, they'd love me enough to stay. But goodness was never the currency in our house. Obedience was. And the second they thought I'd broken that contract, they didn't hesitate. All it took was one lie. One whisper from someone with just enough malice and just enough timing, and they didn't ask, didn't check, didn't care. They believed the rumor over the daughter they raised because the story of the disgraced daughter was easier for them to explain than the reality of the daughter who might think for herself. After they disowned me, people asked what hurt most. The betrayal? The isolation? The loss? But the truth? The truth is, it was how easy it was for them. How quiet. No fight, no goodbye, just a slammed door and a whisper to the rest of the world. She's not ours anymore. That's what gutted me, that I could vanish from their lives and not even leave an echo. For years, I carried that silence with me, like maybe it was my fault. Maybe I'd never been enough to begin with. Maybe I was broken in some way they'd seen long before I did. But then I remembered my grandmother's voice. "You're not too much. They're just too small." And for the first time in a long time, I started to believe maybe she was right. It started with a rumor. A sentence said in a too loud whisper behind a locker door, passed through teeth painted with lip gloss and jealousy. She slept with Ashley's boyfriend. It wasn't true, but truth doesn't matter when the story's better without it. I found out about it the same way the rest of the school did, by the silence that followed me down the hall, the way girls glanced up and then away, the way lockers stopped slamming mid-motion, the way someone muttered, "slut," under their breath as I passed, just loud enough for me to hear it echo all the way into my ribcage. I didn't know where it started, not at first. Later, I would learn it came from my cousin, Rachel. She'd always been the fragile one. The one who cried when her mascara smudged or someone beat her GPA by half a point. We weren't close. Not really. But we shared blood. A family name. That used to mean something. She was dating Ashley's ex, the boy in question. And when he dumped her for someone else, someone no one knew, she needed a reason, a target. She picked me. I never even spoke to him. But again, truth is quieter than scandal. I went home that afternoon confused, shaken, still half believing it would blow over. It didn't. My mother was waiting at the front door. Her arms were crossed, her mouth tight, her eyes already crying. "Is it true?" she asked. I blinked. Is what true? Don't play dumb, Lena, she snapped. Did you sleep with Rachel's boyfriend? The question struck like a slap, but not as hard as the one that followed. Her hand hit my cheek before I could finish saying no. You're disgusting, she whispered. After everything we've taught you, I didn't do anything, I said, my voice trembling. But she wasn't listening. She never was. My father came in next, silent. Always the judge before the trial. He didn't ask for details. Didn't care for evidence, he just looked at me like something foul had stained his shoes. You're no daughter of mine, he said. And just like that, the world I knew folded in on itself. They packed a bag for me. One. No suitcase, just a trash bag filled with clothes. No explanation, no questions, no ride, just go. They told the church I ran off with an older boy. Told my teachers I'd cracked under pressure. Told the neighbors I was struggling and needed space. But what they really meant was that I was gone, erased. A stain on their spotless reputation. The obedient girl who finally gave them a reason to throw her away. I called my grandmother that night. I walked 5 miles to the old gas station and stood under the buzzing light near the payphone, holding quarters with shaking fingers, and prayed she'd pick up. She did. Lena? Her voice cracked with surprise, then panic. Sweetheart, what happened? I broke then. Not loud, not wailing, just a soft, stunned crumbling of everything I'd held together until that moment. She didn't question me. She just told me to come, said I could stay with her until we figured everything out. And for 3 weeks, that's what I did. She made me tea, let me sleep in the guest room, let me cry without asking for the details until I was ready to give them. She didn't push, just listened, loved, believed. But love doesn't keep people alive forever. She passed away 17 days later. A stroke. Sudden. Unforgiving. I was the one who found her on the kitchen floor. The tea kettle still steaming on the stove. A book of crossword puzzles folded neatly beside her chair. I screamed until my throat burned. Because she wasn't just my grandmother. She was the last person in the world who didn't believe the lie. And now I was truly alone. After that, everything blurred. The couch at a friend's place. Then a shelter. Then a series of rooms rented in basements and back alleys. Always with someone's rules taped to the wall in capital letters. No guests. No noise. No problems. Learn to shrink. To vanish. To live so small I barely took up air, and the whole time they carried on, my parents, Rachel, the family who banished me. They smiled for Christmas cards, sat in church pews, threw birthday parties, and not once did they call. Years later, I'd learned the truth about Rachel, about the lie, about the chain of manipulations that started it all. But by then, it didn't matter, because the damage had already been done, and I'd already started building something stronger from the ashes. But I never forgot that moment. Standing on the front porch in the dark, cheek burning, trash bag in hand, and the sound of the door locking behind me. The day my parents chose their image over their daughter, and the lie over the truth. The first year after they disowned me tasted like dust. Everything I touched slipped through my fingers. Jobs, sleep, trust, dignity. I lived out of plastic bags and borrowed spaces. Couch cushions and back seats became beds, showered at gyms, ate what I could afford from vending machines, peanut butter crackers, off-brand cola, trail mix in crinkled plastic. Sometimes I stayed at a women's shelter near the edge of town. Sometimes I didn't even make it that far. There were nights I walked until my feet bled, just to remind myself I was still moving, still alive. But I didn't feel alive. I felt like static, like a broken signal no one bothered to fix. I tried applying for college. Not the Ivy League dream my grandmother once encouraged, just a small community campus with a quiet library and affordable tuition. I had good grades, letters of recommendation, a personal essay I wrote and rewrote until the keyboard faded beneath my fingertips. But when I tried to access the savings account my parents set up when I was 13, the one labeled "For Lena's Future," I found it emptied, closed, gone. They'd pulled the money the same week they kicked me out. The note on the account read, "Withdrawn by primary guardians." They had stolen the only thing I still thought belonged to me, the future I fought to deserve, and it broke something in me. Not loudly, not with screaming, just a soft, devastating snap. So I worked. Anything I could get. I waitressed at greasy diners, scrubbing tables sticky with ketchup and broken promises. I cleaned offices overnight, scrubbing toilets while people in suits slept easy in their suburban homes. I took shifts at a call center where I read the same script hundreds of times a day and was still yelled at like I built the system myself. I smiled when I had to, bit my tongue until it bled, pretended I was fine. On paper, I was surviving. But in reality, I was disappearing. Eventually, I moved. 2 states away. No goodbye, no forwarding address. I needed air. A new name on a lease. A town where no one knew the headline version of me my parents had circulated. The daughter who disappointed them, the girl who ran wild, the troubled child who broke her mother's heart. At first it worked. I was anonymous. I worked. I slept. I existed. But I didn't belong anywhere. Because deep down, the lie had seeped in. I started to believe it. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I'd just been more perfect, none of it would have happened. I carried that weight like a second spine. Until one day, it cracked. It happened in the middle of a move. Just another shoebox apartment. 4th in 2 years. I was packing up an old duffel bag I hadn't touched in months when I found the flip phone my grandmother gave me on my 16th birthday. The one I'd forgotten I kept. It was off. Dead. Dusty. I plugged it in on a whim, expecting nothing. The screen lit up like a ghost blinking awake. One voicemail. Dated 3 days before she died. I don't remember breathing as I pressed play. "Lena, it's me." Her voice, soft, strong, unapologetic. "I don't believe a word they said about you. You are not who they say you are. You never were. You are good, baby, so good, and you deserve better than people who only love you when you're silent. Don't forget who you are. Not ever. I love you." Click. That message cracked something wide open inside me, because it was the first time in years someone said my name without judgment. It was her voice, still reaching for me from the other side of the silence, still seeing me, not as a disappointment, but as a person, as hers. And in that moment, I realized I had survived so much, and not once had I been given credit for that survival. So I decided I wasn't going to survive anymore. I was going to build. Not for them. For me. The next day, I signed up for a GED prep course. The day after that, I applied for community college again. This time with a scholarship essay that didn't beg for pity but promised power. I moved into a shared flat with 2 other women who didn't ask questions. I bought a secondhand laptop and walked to the library every day like it was a pilgrimage. I studied, I worked, I climbed, I didn't post, didn't brag, didn't tell anyone, because this wasn't a comeback. It was a rebirth. And when the time came to face the people who buried me, I'd be unrecognizable. Not because I'd become someone else, but because I'd finally become me. I didn't tell anyone when I enrolled. No Facebook update, no campus tour photos, no announcement post with a carefully staged laptop and latte. Just a quiet click at midnight on a public library computer, and a confirmation email that felt like oxygen. I was accepted into state college. Psychology at first, because I wanted to understand people like my parents, people who could rewrite history and sleep soundly afterward. People who could look at their child and say, "You're no daughter of mine," and then carry on like they'd lost nothing at all. I studied trauma, gaslighting, generational shame. I read about survivors who clawed their way out of silence and built lives from broken pieces, and I saw myself on every page. I worked the entire time, nights, weekends, early mornings. I scrubbed office floors at 2 a.m. and took notes on Freud at 8 a.m. I survived on bad coffee and a stubborn refusal to disappear again. And slowly, I began to rise. My grades were perfect. Not because I wanted gold stars, but because failure had once cost me everything. By the time I graduated, I was on a first-name basis with every professor in the psych department, and quietly applying to law school with a personal statement that started with, "When I was 17, I was disowned." Over a lie? What I want now is not revenge. It's justice. I got in, full scholarship. I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just started packing. Law school stripped me raw and rebuilt me in equal measure. I gravitated toward estate and elder law, specifically fraud and financial exploitation. Maybe because part of me always wondered what really happened to my grandmother's estate. The one she had mentioned in passing once, just months before she died. "There's something set aside for you, baby," she'd said. "Don't let anyone tell you different." But no one had ever mentioned it after her death. I assumed it was just another thing they took, another truth they buried. Until one day, deep into my second year, I was working late at the firm where I interned. I was reviewing a probate case involving an elderly woman's trust that had mysteriously vanished from official filings. It felt familiar. Too familiar. And suddenly I couldn't breathe, because I knew that feeling, that silence, that erasure. That night I went home, opened my laptop, and started digging. I pulled my grandmother's name from the county records. Nothing came up at first, just her obituary and the church's press release about her graceful passing. But the deeper I searched, the more gaps I found. The deed to her home? Transferred 3 weeks after her death, to my parents, without a sale. The trust listed in her name? Gone from official probate records, but referenced just once, in a local bank's quarterly report as closed due to consolidation under secondary beneficiaries. I cross-referenced the document with the law database at school, and then I froze, because the secondary beneficiaries were listed as Jonathan and Ruth Winslow. No mention of me, no will, no dispute, no court filing, just silence, erasure. Again. But this time, I wasn't a scared 17-year-old girl clutching a trash bag on a front lawn. I was certified in estate fraud law, and I knew exactly what to look for. I filed a public records request for all holdings, transfers, and tax documents linked to my grandmother's estate. It took weeks, but when the documents came in, they smelled like mothballs and manipulation. There were discrepancies in signatures. The trust paperwork had been amended 2 months before her death, ironically while she was in the hospital on heavy medication. The notary who allegedly witnessed it, no longer practicing. My parents had transferred over $350,000 in property and liquid assets into their names and used it to buy a lakeside vacation home, 2 cars, and fund a ministry retreat that looked suspiciously like a luxury cruise. There was no record of that money being split between heirs, no paperwork showing a contested will, nothing, because no one had contested it. No one had been allowed to. I stared at the numbers, the names, the falsified dates and doctored forms, and for the first time in 10 years, I felt something deeper than rage. I felt clarity. They hadn't just disowned me. They'd buried my name, my rights, my history. They used my grandmother's death to fund a life of curated grace and reputation, and left me scraping change for vending machine dinners. But this time, they wouldn't get away with it. Not quietly, because I had the training, the truth, and the receipts. Justice doesn't come with a siren. It arrives in silence, in manila folders, in highlighter ink, in the gentle click of a pen sliding across paper. It's slow, patient, methodical, and this time it was mine to build. I didn't make a sound when I started collecting proof. No dramatic confrontation. No phone calls, no warning. Just late nights, legal pads, and an old USB drive with encrypted folders I hid under a false name on my laptop. I called it Inventory 042. No one would look twice. Inside were scanned deeds, financial ledgers, probate filings, notarized statements, and one quiet goal: take back what they stole. I began comparing documents. The original trust transfer, signed just before my grandmother passed, looked real at first glance. But signatures don't lie. The one labeled Final Amendment was shaky, misaligned, the date next to it, one day after she was moved into palliative care. According to her medical records, she was nonverbal by then, which meant whoever signed that paper didn't just falsify a legal document, they forged a dying woman's name. I built the case piece by piece, every property transfer, every asset consolidation, every suspicious bank withdrawal timed suspiciously close to her final days. The lake house, purchased in full using funds transferred from an account that had once belonged to Evelyn Margaret Holloway, my grandmother. The account closure came just 8 days after her funeral. No disbursement records, no joint signatures, no distribution to heirs, just gone. Like me. I sat on the floor of my one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by piles of documents, photocopies, notes, flagged dates, and I didn't feel rage anymore, Just focus. There was power. In the paper, power in the details. Because people like my parents, so obsessed with image, with polish, with control, always believed that silence was consent. That if no one screamed, they'd gotten away with it. But I didn't need to scream. I had receipts. I went looking for someone who might remember my grandmother's original will. Someone who might still have a copy, or at least a memory that could validate what I already suspected. It took a week of phone calls and one long afternoon of sitting in a dusty records room at a law office in the next town over. And then I found him. Gerald Price, Eska's semi-retired estate attorney with trembling hands and a voice like cracked oak. He remembered her immediately. "Evelyn," he said, squinting at my face. "You're her granddaughter, aren't you?" I nodded. My throat was too tight to speak. He shuffled through a file cabinet with fingers that had once held entire fortunes in their grip and pulled out a thin folder. "I can't give you the original, but I can tell you this." He tapped the top. Page gently, eyes sharp despite the age around them. "Your name was in the first draft. She left you the house, the trust, and the rights to manage the family assets." I stared at him, barely breathing. She said, and I quote, "Lena's the only one who ever listened. She's the only one I trust." Something broke open in my chest. Not pain. Proof. All these years I hadn't imagined it. She had tried to protect me. They were the ones who erased that. I thanked him, slid a copy of my card across the desk, told him I might need a statement someday. He patted my hand gently. "I'll be here when you do." That night, I compiled everything into a single file, case 827H, just a code, no names, no emotion. I documented the forgeries, the unauthorized transfers, the contradictory filings. I wrote a summary the way I was trained to, as if it was someone else's pain. Subject was removed as beneficiary despite medical evidence, showing decedent was cognitively impaired at time of amendment. Trust documentation shows clear indicators of coercion and fraud by secondary beneficiaries, parents. No drama, no blood, just facts. It was cleaner that way, and when it was done, I submitted it, anonymously. I didn't want my name attached. Not yet. Not until they were far enough in to be drowning. No chance to twist the narrative, to claim I was acting out, making things up, seeking revenge. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I sent it to the State Estate Fraud Bureau, flagged under suspicious inheritance activity. I attached the evidence, labeled and sourced, and then I shut my laptop. Sat in the quiet and breathed. For the first time in 10 years, the weight in my chest felt lighter because justice wasn't loud. Justice was coming, and they wouldn't even see it until it was too late. It started with a knock on their door. Not a loud one, not aggressive. Just the firm, measured rhythm of someone who carries authority like a badge and doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. A process server, dressed in gray. Calm, neutral, efficient. He handed over a sealed envelope, thick, heavy, official, and said 2 words that would begin the undoing of everything they'd spent a decade building. "You've been served." Inside was a summons, estate fraud, trust misappropriation, forgery, undue influence. Legal terms wrapped in legal weight. But what it really meant was this: you stole from your daughter. You stole from a dying woman who trusted you. And now, someone's come to collect. By the end of the week, their accounts were frozen. The checking account, the savings, the investment portfolios tucked away in clean little folders labeled retirement planning. Gone, access revoked, credit cards declined, auto payments bounced. The lake house, flagged for investigation. The primary home, the one I was raised in, the one they remodeled 5 times just to impress people at Bible study, seized. A bright orange notice nailed to the door. Property under court review. Do not remove. The phone calls started pouring in, from the bank, from the church, from friends suddenly unsure whether being close to the Winslows still meant something. And in the middle of it all, me, but they didn't know that yet. The first time they saw me again was in court. It was a Tuesday. Cold. Rainy. The kind of gray morning where everything feels quiet in a way that makes the sound of footsteps echo just a little too loud. I arrived. Early. Sat in the back row. Watched them walk in. My father, once proud, upright, composed, looked like a man holding a crumbling statue together with duct tape. My mother had aged 10 years beyond the 10 that had passed. Her pearls looked too bright against her sallow skin. They scanned the room, expecting to find some stranger behind the case. They weren't ready for me. When my name was called, I rose. Walked to the front of the courtroom. And I swear, time stopped. My father's jaw slackened. My mother's eyes widened like she was seeing a ghost. I didn't look away. Didn't flinch. I took the witness stand as the lead legal advisor to the investigative team. I'd been granted special certification after finishing my work under my mentor. The state allowed me to participate directly due to personal stake and professional qualification. I had earned my seat, and they were still trying to find theirs. The judge asked me to confirm the findings. I did. I listed the dates, the documents, the false signatures. I presented the original draft of my grandmother's will, her real will, unearthed through meticulous research, traced back to the original attorney's ledger. I handed over the bank transfers, the asset consolidations, the withdrawals. The lies. Their lies. My mother's hands began to shake. My father's face drained of color. And then, when the silence was too loud to bear, I turned to them. For the first time in 10 years, I looked them in the eyes. They stared back like I was someone unrecognizable. And maybe I was. Maybe that 17-year-old girl with the bruised heart and the trash bag of clothes had really died that night they locked the door behind her, because the woman standing in front of them now wasn't here to ask for answers. She was here to deliver truth. So I said it, clear, measured, cold. 10 years ago, you erased me over a lie. Now I'm here, with the truth. The courtroom didn't gasp. This wasn't a movie, this was real, and real betrayal doesn't echo. It sinks. They didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Because the documents spoke louder than any excuse. The lawyer they hired was already sweating through his collar. Their entire defense strategy crumbled under the weight of undeniable timelines. You can't rewrite a ledger. You can't unsign a forged document. And you definitely can't erase a daughter who learned how to fight like this. When I stepped down from the stand, I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because the people who once forced me out of my home were now fighting to keep theirs, and losing, because I wasn't asking them to see me anymore. I came so the world could see them, and it did, in legal filings, in witness statements, in the pages of a story they never thought I'd survive long enough to finish. But I did. I finished it with facts, with courage, with the truth they thought would never see daylight. Reputation doesn't shatter all at once. It cracks. Quietly at first. A whisper in a pew, a subtle shift in eye contact, a polite invitation that never arrives, and then it splinters, until the image they worked so hard to polish reflects nothing but what's always been there underneath. My parents didn't lose everything in court. The court just made it official. What came after, that was what truly broke them. The news hit the community like a dropped hymn book. Prominent church couple, accused of elder fraud and family inheritance scandal. It ran in the local paper, buried just beneath a blurb about city council elections. But the headline traveled faster than any sermon ever had. People talked, not loudly, not publicly, but in grocery store aisles and after Bible study, and between slices of lemon pound cake at the fellowship hall. They all knew. The Winslows, who once wore their piety like armor, were now the cautionary tale. Old friends stopped calling, neighbors stopped waving, church pews that once filled around them now left gaps wide enough for silence to sit comfortably beside them. The pastor asked them to step back from leadership duties while the matter is resolved. Translated, "You're a liability now." Their prayer circle turned to a polite nod from across the room. The women who used to praise my mother's pie recipe no longer asked her to bring dessert. The men who shook my father's hand with respect now kept theirs in their pockets. Their world, built on image, appearances, perfection, had finally crumbled, because image only works when people still choose to believe it. And now, they didn't. Then came the repo trucks, one in front of their home, hauling away the sleek black car they bought with money meant for my grandmother's medical care. Another 2 weeks later for the second vehicle, because unpaid legal fees had drained whatever was left. They tried to sell the vacation house, but the court froze it before they could get the listing up. It sits empty now, quiet, unloved, like a ghost of greed in the middle of pine trees and lake wind. I watched all of it unfold without saying a word. No social media posts, no phone calls, no "I told you so." Because justice doesn't need an audience, it just needs truth. And the truth had done exactly what it was supposed to. After the final hearing, where the court awarded restitution to the estate, where the judge cited intentional deception, exploitation of power, and breach of fiduciary duty, I waited until the room emptied. They were still sitting there. My mother, pale and silent. My father, staring forward like the verdict hadn't landed yet. I approached the bench slowly, like a eulogy. No rage, just gravity. And I placed a folder beside them, cream-colored, unlabeled, deliberate. They didn't speak. Neither did I. And then I walked away. But inside that folder, there were 4 things. The first, photocopies of every forged signature, every altered date, every paper trail they thought would stay buried in drawers and courthouses no one would bother to check. Labeled, highlighted, exposed. The second, A letter from my grandmother. The last one she ever wrote. It wasn't addressed to me, it was to them, dear. Found it among her old Bible pages, tucked between verses about grace and grief. It read, "If you ever read this, know that what you've done will come back around. Maybe not today. Maybe not even while I'm alive. But Lena will rise, because she's stronger than both of us combined. And when she does, you won't be able to say you didn't know." The third, a photo of me on graduation day. Black gown, gold stole, diploma in hand, no caption, just proof of everything I'd become without them. The fourth, a single sheet of paper. Typed, simple. No threats, no demands, just one sentence. I didn't come back for revenge. I came back for justice. I don't know what they did with that folder, if they opened it right away, if they tore it apart, if they even had the strength left to read the letter from the woman they betrayed. But I do know this. They will never forget the girl they cast out for a lie, because she came back with the one thing they never expected, the truth. I didn't move into a mansion. I didn't buy a sports car or post a photo of courtroom papers next to a glass of champagne. Instead, I bought a little white house by the sea. Just enough room for me, a dog named Piper, and the kind of quiet I used to think only existed in novels. The walls are sun-warmed. The windows catch morning light like honey, and the garden, it's mine, every inch of it. I grow rosemary and sweet peas and a stubborn patch of lavender that refuses to bloom on schedule. It doesn't have to. Nothing does anymore. My firm, Evelyn. Legal and advocacy group is small, but it's loud in all the ways that matter. We protect the disinherited, the overlooked, the forgotten, the ones pushed aside by their own blood. The ones erased, like I once was, by people who thought love was conditional and silence was obedience. I take on cases most firms won't touch. A teen stripped of her inheritance by her uncle. A young man gaslit into signing away land left to him by his grandfather. A single mother denied custody by a system that still can't tell the difference between money and care. They walk into my office scared, and they leave with a plan. Because I know what it's like to be told your story isn't worth reading, and I know how to rewrite it. On Thursdays, I mentor teens from the local youth shelter. We sit in a circle on folding chairs and drink bad coffee, and I let them talk. Not about trauma, not unless they want to, but about them, about music, about dreams, about what it feels like to want a place in the world and not know where the door is. I don't fix them. I just make space for them to exist. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Once a year, on the anniversary of the day I was cast out, I opened my grandmother's voicemail. The sound's a little crackly now, the file worn by time, but her voice still reaches through the static like it always did. I don't believe a word they said about you. You are not who they say you are. You are good, baby. So good. I close my eyes when I hear it. Let it settle in the bones beneath my ribs. Because she saw me when no one else did. And that voice, that's the root of everything I've built. Tonight, the sky is painted in bruised golds and deep indigo. The waves crash steady against the shore, soft and loud all at once. Piper is curled at my feet, ears twitching in the ocean breeze. I stand barefoot in the sand, hem of my dress damp, hair tangled from wind and salt. In my hand is a letter. The paper is aged, creased. The ink slightly smudged in places. It's addressed, simply, to the girl they abandoned. I wrote it years ago, in a motel room with water-stained ceilings and dreams that felt too far away to hold, but I never sent it. I never needed to. Because that girl, she survived, and she became everything they said she couldn't. I kneel, press the letter into a crack between two smooth rocks, and let the wind carry the last of it. Not to forget, but to release. Because I'm not the abandoned girl anymore. I'm the woman who made a home from splinters, a name from ashes, a life from silence. They disowned me over a lie. But I built a life so strong, even the truth couldn't shake it.